Okay, now we come to the next sutta, 109, Mahapunnama Sutta, the greater discourse on the full moon night. This sutta, I think, is also found in the Samyutta Nikaya, Samyutta 22, Kanda Samyutta 22.82. Thus have I heard, on one occasion the Blessed One was living at Savatthi in the eastern park in the palace of Migara's mother. Palace of Migara's mother refers to Visakha. On that occasion, on the Uposatha day of the 15th, on the full moon night, the Blessed One was seated in the open, surrounded by the Sangha of monks. Then a certain monk rose from his seat, arranged his upper robe on one shoulder, and extending his hands in reverential salutation towards the Blessed One, said to him, Venerable Sir, or Bhante, I would ask the Blessed One about a certain point, if the Blessed One would grant me an answer to my question. And the Buddha said, sit down on your own seat, monk, and ask what you like. So the monk sat on his own seat and said to the Blessed One, are these not, Venerable Sir, the 5 aggregates affected by clinging, or the 5 aggregates of attachment? That is, the material form aggregate or body affected by clinging, the feeling aggregate affected by clinging, perception aggregate affected by clinging, the volition aggregate affected by clinging, consciousness aggregate affected by clinging. And the Buddha said, these monks are the 5 aggregates affected by clinging. That is, the material form aggregate, the feeling, perception, volition, and consciousness. Saying, good Venerable Sir, the monk delighted and rejoiced in the Blessed One's words. Then he asked a further question. But Venerable Sir, in what are these 5 aggregates affected by clinging rooted? And the Buddha said, these 5 aggregates affected by clinging are rooted in desire, chanda, monk. Then he asked again, Venerable Sir, is that clinging the same as these 5 aggregates affected by clinging? Or is the clinging something apart from the 5 aggregates affected by clinging? And the Buddha said, monk, that clinging is neither the same as these 5 aggregates affected by clinging, nor is the clinging something apart from the 5 aggregates affected by clinging. It is the desire and lust in regard to the 5 aggregates affected by clinging that is the clinging there. Venerable Sir, can there be diversity in the desire and lust regarding these 5 aggregates affected by clinging? There can be, monk, the Blessed One said. Here, monk, someone thinks thus, may my material form or body be thus in the future. May my feeling be thus in the future. May my perception be thus in the future. May my volition be thus in the future. May my consciousness be thus in the future. Thus there is diversity in the desire and lust regarding these 5 aggregates affected by clinging. My Venerable Sir, in what way does the term aggregates apply to the aggregates? Monk, any kind of material form whatever, whether past, future or present, internal or external, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, this is the material form aggregate. Any kind of feeling whatever, far or near, etc., this is the feeling aggregate. Similarly, any kind of perception whatever, any kind of volition whatever, any kind of consciousness whatever, whether past, future or present, internal or external, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near. It is in this way, monk, that the term aggregate applies to the aggregates. What is the cause and condition, Venerable Sir, for the manifestation of the material form aggregate? What is the cause and condition for the manifestation of the feeling aggregate, perception aggregate, volition aggregate, consciousness aggregate? The 4 great elements, monk, are the cause and condition for the manifestation of the material form aggregate. Contact is the cause and condition for the manifestation of the feeling aggregate. Contact is the cause and condition for the manifestation of the perception aggregate. Contact is the cause and condition for the manifestation of the volition aggregate. Mentality, materiality is the cause and condition for the manifestation of the consciousness aggregate. Stop here for a moment. So the earlier parts, I think you can understand. Buddha says these 5 aggregates are rooted in desire. It's because of desire that they manifest. And the clinging is the clinging for the 5 aggregates. And this last part, the 4 great elements are the cause and condition for the manifestation of the material form aggregate. Rupa or matter is defined as the 4 great elements. So normally in the suttas it is said that when consciousness vijnana arises, it arises together with nama rupa. Nama rupa is mentality, materiality. So nama rupa arise with vijnana and sees, they always come together. They're like Siamese twins joined. So when you have vijnana, which is consciousness, for these 6 consciousnesses, that means seeing consciousness, hearing consciousness, smelling, taste, touch, and thinking consciousness. Whenever the consciousness arises, there must be an object. So Namarupa is the object of vijnana, object of consciousness. So Namarupa is phenomena. So this phenomena, what we are conscious of in the world, we normally say has 2 parts, mentality, materiality, the mental part and the material part. The mental part, of course, is from the mind. This material part, rupa, normally we think is the physical world, right? But this physical world in the suttas is defined as the 4 properties, earth, water, fire, wind, the 4 great elements. Earth signifies the hardness element. Anything that we consider hard, we say that is the earth element. Of course, hardness has varying degrees, various degrees of hardness. Even softness also is a type of hardness. And then earth, water. Water is a property of cohesion. Water has a property of cohering things together. It's because of the water element in us that we have a form. If we were to take away all the water from our body, desiccate our body, we turn into powder and the body will crumble. So this water has this property of cohering and giving things a shape. Earth, water, fire. Fire is a heat element. So the presence of the heat element or the absence of the heat element. So that is the heat. And then fire. And then earth, water, fire, wind. Wind is the motion. So this physical world, we like to think of it as something very distinct from the mental, that it is the physical world. But if we consider it in more detail, each one, for example, this hardness. Hardness is a perception. Hardness is perception. So perception is mind-made, right? So similarly with heat, with motion, with this perception of form and all these things. So for example, 2 persons may have a different perception. For example, if somebody, his karma is so bad, he lands up in hell, so he's burned by the fires of hell. Okay? But if an arahant goes to hell, his mind is different, so he does not feel the fires of hell. It's not burned by the fires of hell. So even this physical world that we think is so solid, is so real, actually it's all mind-made. That's why the whole world exists in the 6 consciousness. So when there is consciousness, there is world. There is no consciousness, there is no world. So Nibbana, in the state of Nibbana, Nibbana is not a place. Nibbana is a state when the 6 consciousness ceases. No world exists. And then Buddha says Nibbana is an extremely blissful state. Venerable Sir, how does identity view come to be? This identity view is Sakkaya Ditthi. Here among an untaught ordinary person who has no regard for Aryans, noble ones, and is unskilled and undisciplined in their Dhamma, who has no regard for true men, and is unskilled and undisciplined in their Dhamma, regards material form as self, or self as possessed of material form, or material form as in the self, or self as in the material form. Similarly, he regards feeling, perception, volition, consciousness in the same way. That is how identity view comes to be. But Venerable Sir, how does identity view not come to be? Here, monk, a well-taught, noble disciple, Aryan disciple, who has regard for noble ones, Aryans, and is skilled and disciplined in their Dhamma, who has regard for true men, and is skilled and disciplined in their Dhamma, does not regard material form as self, or self as possessed of material form, or material form as in the self, or self as in the material form. Similarly, he does not regard feeling, perception, volition, and consciousness as self, or self as possessed of the aggregates, or the aggregates as in the self, or the self as in the aggregate. That is how identity view does not come to be. Stop here for a moment. This identity view is one of the 10 factors that we have to eliminate to become an Arya, to become a Sotapanna, the lowest fruition. The Sotapanna has eliminated 3 factors. One of them is identity view. So this identity view means you identify yourself with the 5 aggregates. You take the 5 aggregates to be the self, or as belonging to the self, or the self as inside the 5 aggregates, or the 5 aggregates as inside the self. So you identify yourself with the body and the mind, because these 5 aggregates are the body and the mind, which ordinary people so regard. You take the body and the mind to be the self. So when a person understands the Dhamma, he can see that the body and the mind are impermanent, changing, ever changing, changing at a very fast speed. And if you cling to it, it's going to cause you to suffer, because nothing in the world is permanent. So when a person understands the Dhamma, slowly he let go of this body and the mind. So when he does not see that the body and the mind are the self, so he becomes a Sotapanna. Although he still has a self, and the self is somehow tied to the 5 aggregates, but he can see that the 5 aggregates, the body and the mind, is not the self, or belonging to the self, etc. What, Venerable Sir, is the gratification? What is the danger and what is the escape in the case of material form? What is the gratification, danger and escape in the case of feeling, perception, volition and consciousness? The pleasure and joy, monk, that arise in dependence on material form. This is the gratification in the case of material form. Material form is impermanent, suffering and subject to change. This is the danger in the case of material form. The removal of desire and lust, the abandonment of desire and lust for material form. This is the escape in the case of material form. Similarly, the pleasure and joy that arise in dependence on feeling, perception, volition and consciousness, that is the gratification in the case of the aggregates. But these aggregates are impermanent, suffering and subject to change. That is the danger in the case of the aggregates. The removal of their desire and lust, the abandonment of desire and lust for the aggregates, that is the escape in the case of the aggregates. I think last year we went through one sutta where we, in the Majjhima Nikaya, where we talk about the danger, the gratification, danger and escape in the case of material form. And it was said, the gratification of material form is to see a very beautiful body, a very beautiful material form, like in the case of a 16-year-old young girl in the prime of her beauty. And the danger is that when you see her again 80 years later or 90 years later, she's bent over and white hair or no hair, and feeble with age, wrinkled skin, ugly looking. That same girl, after many years, becomes ugly looking. That's the danger. Or she gets cancer or something in the middle of her life, and then she's lying on her bed, lying on her own, excrement and urine, unable to help herself, and people have to feed her, clean her, and all these things. That is again the danger. And then the third case is that after this beautiful girl has died, suppose the corpse is 3 days old. You look at the corpse, it's smelly, bloated, blue-black, and all that. So this is the danger of material form. So things in the world are like that. When it's beautiful, we appreciate it, we want to cling to it, and then it changes. That beautiful girl becomes ugly, becomes a smelly corpse, and all this. So if we understand the Dhamma, then we realize things that we like to cling to are the very source of suffering. So then we realize it's not worth it. And slowly, as we mature in the spiritual path, we let go. Venerable Sir, how does one know, how does one see, so that in regard to this body with its consciousness and all external signs, there is no I-making, mind-making, and underlying tendency to conceit? Monk, any kind of material form whatever, whether past or present, internal or external, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, one sees all material form as it actually is with proper wisdom thus. This is not mine. This I am not. This is not myself. Similarly, any kind of feeling, perception, volition, consciousness, whatever, whether past, present, internal or external, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, one sees them as they actually are with proper wisdom thus. This is not mine. This I am not. This is not myself. It is when one knows and sees thus in regard to this body with its consciousness and all external signs, that there is no I-making, mind-making, or underlying tendency to conceit. Stop it for a moment. So here the Buddha says we have to see that these 5 aggregates, any type whatever, whether past or present, internal or external, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, all types of aggregates are not mine, are not I, are not myself. So when one realizes this, then the tendency to conceit slowly we let go. Then in the mind of a certain monk, this thought arose. So it seems material form is not self, feeling is not self, perception is not self, volition is not self, consciousness is not self. What self then will actions done by the not-self affect? Then the Blessed One, knowing in his mind the thought in the mind of that monk, addressed the monks thus: It is possible, monks, that some misguided man here, obtuse and ignorant, with his mind dominated by craving, might think that he can outstrip the teacher's dispensation thus. So it seems material form is not the self, feeling is not self, perception is not self, volition is not self, consciousness is not self. What self then would actions done by the not-self affect? Now monks, you have been trained by me through interrogation on various occasions in regard to various things. Monks, what do you think? Is material form permanent or impermanent? Impermanent, Venerable Sir. Is what is impermanent suffering or happiness? Suffering, Venerable Sir. Is what is impermanent suffering and subject to change, fit to be regarded thus? This is mine, this I am, this is myself. No, Venerable Sir. Monks, what do you think? Is feeling, perception, volition, consciousness permanent or impermanent? Impermanent, Venerable Sir. Is what is impermanent suffering or happiness? Suffering, Venerable Sir. Is what is impermanent suffering and subject to change, fit to be regarded thus? This is mine, this I am, this is myself. No, Venerable Sir. Therefore, monks, any kind of material form whatever, whether past, future or present, internal or external, gross or subtle, etc. Similarly, any kind of feeling, perception, volition, consciousness, all should be seen as they actually are with proper wisdom thus. This is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. Seeing thus, a well-taught noble disciple becomes disenchanted with material form. disenchanted with feeling, disenchanted with perception, disenchanted with volition, disenchanted with consciousness. Being disenchanted, he becomes dispassionate. Through dispassion, his mind is liberated. When it is liberated, there comes the knowledge, it is liberated. He understands birth is destroyed, the holy life has been lived. What had to be done has been done. There is no more coming to any state of being. That is what the Blessed One said. The monks were satisfied and delighted in the Blessed One's words. Now while this discourse was being spoken, through not clinging, the minds of 60 monks were liberated from the tames. That's the end of the sutta. This last part is very important. You find this a logic that the Buddha uses when the Aryan disciple understands it, then he let go and he becomes liberated. Namely, that the Buddha makes them see that these 5 aggregates are impermanent, and what is impermanent is a source of suffering, and what is permanent, a source of suffering and subject to change. Is not fit to regard it as mine or I or myself. So when they see this, then they let go, become disenchanted. But the problem is, unless our body is very sick, it's very difficult to see this. But imagine one day, if you have cancer, you have terminal cancer, and your body, the cancer has run all over the place, and it's giving you a lot of pain, and it's breaking up. Then only that person will see really what the Buddha says. What is impermanent is suffering, and not fit to be regarded as I and mine.